For nearly 50 years, this brutal murder remained a mystery, until now. A young girl vanished without a trace, her case growing colder with every passing year. But thanks to cutting-edge forensic science, the horrifying truth has finally come to light. Who was behind this monstrous crime? And how did they finally get caught? Stay with us as we unravel one of Canada's most chilling unsolved cases. One of the most shocking and mysterious cases in Canada's criminal history remained unsolved for nearly half a century. Despite many people losing hope of ever learning the truth, the victims' parents never stopped fighting for justice. Just recently, thanks to advancements in forensic science and modern technology, this perplexing case was finally cracked. Sharron Prior was born in the winter of 1959 in the picturesque city of Montreal. Her mother, who was born in Great Britain, had immigrated to Canada with her family at a young age and spent her entire life there. It was in Canada that fate brought her together with her future husband, George, who served in the Canadian Army. The young couple fell in love at first sight and soon got married. Shortly after, their firstborn child, Sharron, came into the world. Just a couple of days before the little girl's second birthday, her mother gave birth to 2 more children, twins named Romine and Maureen. In 1962, George was transferred to the city of Manitoba for military service. He moved there with his family. Their new home was located in one of the city's older neighborhoods, which was nevertheless considered quite safe and peaceful. Sometime after the move, the couple welcomed another child, a son they named George Jar. Unfortunately, soon after this, problems began to arise in the family. The tension in the relationship reached a critical point. As a result, in 1965, the couple decided to divorce. George continued his military service and was often away, while his ex-wife and 4 children moved into an apartment in the city of Langley. They were provided this home through a special assistance program for military families. It was a quiet and cozy place, ideal for raising children. The woman had no idea that, even in such peaceful neighborhoods, true monsters in human form could be lurking. From childhood, Sharron was an incredibly kind, caring, and compassionate girl. She was always ready to help those in need, whether it was a person or a defenseless animal. The girl often picked up stray cats and dogs off the streets, especially those that had suffered from human cruelty or illness. She lovingly cared for them, nursed them back to health, and only then sought new owners for them. Sharron adored animals and dreamed of becoming a veterinarian in the future. In addition, the girl was passionate about sports and creativity. She attended a hockey club, art classes, and even took needlework lessons. It seemed that a wonderful future, full of bright events and accomplishments, awaited her. Her mother couldn't be more proud of her eldest daughter, who was growing up to be independent, responsible, and sensible beyond her years. Sharron always tried to avoid bad company and trouble. But unfortunately, even this did not save her from a fatal encounter with true evil. In 1975, life was going on as usual for the Prior family. 16-year-old Sharron, like all teenagers, was facing typical problems and difficulties for her age. She loved trendy music and stylish clothes, which her parents did not always approve of. In addition, the girl had started dating a boy named John, who had been in love with her since the 4th grade. He had finally managed to win Sharron's heart, and the young couple began seeing each other. They often hung out with friends and seemed like the perfect match. Seeing their sincere feelings, the girl's parents supported the relationship. According to Sharron's mother, she and her daughter never had any serious arguments. There was always mutual understanding and respect between them. The girl was surrounded by only good people, but even they could not protect her from the terrible tragedy that shattered the life of the entire family. March 29, 1975, began like any ordinary day. Sharron woke up and had breakfast while her mother was out shopping for Easter groceries and gifts. Upon returning home, the woman brought the purchases inside, and her eldest daughter helped put them away. This day was supposed to be special for the whole family. The mother's friends were planning to visit with their son, Stephen, as well as her boyfriend. Sharron spent most of the day painting Easter eggs and preparing for the holiday. Stephen arrived before the other guests and played with the girl's younger brother. After school, Sharron and Stephen were going to stop by the local sports association, which, in addition to sports, also offered needlework. The girl was supposed to pick up a special jacket there, called the Leo. It was named after one of the organization's founders, who had died of leukemia. This jacket was a symbol of membership in the association, but it was not simply handed out. To earn such a reward, children had to prove themselves, for example, by selling lottery tickets. Sharron really wanted to deserve this jacket and managed to sell enough tickets. So, she eagerly and proudly went to the association to collect her prize, but disappointment awaited the girl. There was no jacket in her size available. Saddened, Sharron had to return home empty, handed with Stephen. However, she did not lose her festive mood and decided to pick up the jacket another time. Upon returning, the girl joined her mother and her boyfriend, Doug, helping them with the final preparations. When all the guests had gathered, a wonderful holiday dinner took place. Afterward, Sharron and her mom had painted eggs around the house for the younger children to have fun searching for later. Then, the girl asked her mother for permission to go out. At 6:30, Sharron left the house wearing her favorite suede jacket. She was headed to a pizzeria to meet friends. A neighbor girl initially went with her, but changed her mind about accompanying Sharron further. The girls said goodbye, and each went their separate way. One home, and the other to meet up with friends. A whole group of young people had already gathered at the pizzeria waiting for Sharron. But for some reason, she did not show up at the appointed time. The teenagers figured the girl had simply decided to take a little walk with her boyfriend John. It was completely out of character for the always punctual and responsible Sharron to be late. While Sharron was away from home, her mother put the younger children to bed and spent the evening in front of the TV. The woman began to worry that her daughter had still not returned, even though she should have been home a long time ago. However, she decided not to panic prematurely, assuming the girl had simply lost track of time in the company of friends or with her boyfriend. But as the hours passed, the mother grew increasingly anxious. She called Sharron's acquaintances, hoping to find out where she might be. Neither her girlfriends nor her boyfriend John had any idea about the girl's whereabouts. The mother's worst suspicions were confirmed that evening. Sharron had not made it to the pizzeria. The neighbor girl, with whom she had left the house, confirmed that they had parted ways on the street, and she had not seen Sharron since. A conversation with Mary, Sharron's closest friend, further heightened the anxiety. From her, the mother learned that earlier that day, a young woman had been attacked not far from their home. The assailant had beaten the victim, leaving her in jeans and pointed-toe shoes. Hearing these details, Sharron's mother was seized by panic. She realized that the place and time of the attack exactly coincided with the route her daughter usually took. The woman immediately went to the police. But the detectives were in no hurry to jump to premature conclusions. Instead of immediately accusing someone of the crime, they decided to launch a large-scale search operation without delay. Hundreds of concerned citizens who learned about the girl's disappearance joined the effort. Everyone hoped Sharron would return home safe and sound. The police tried to maintain hope in her family, although they themselves understood that, after the critical 48 hours, the chances of finding the teenager alive were rapidly dwindling. Sharron had no reason to run away from home, no conflicts with her parents, no problems at school. Her boyfriend John was a decent young man, and their relationship was filled with love and understanding. He definitely could not have hurt the girl. In general, Sharron did not have conflicts with anyone. Days later, a chilling discovery was made. On April 1st, 1975, a man named Jack arrived at his countryside home. He noticed the lock was broken, although there were no signs of a break-in, as if the perpetrator had used his own key. Only the owner had free access to the house. Going out to the driveway, the man saw a woman's body, naked from the waist down. At the same time, nothing was missing from the house. Jack could not understand why someone had dumped the corpse on his property. The police arrived at the scene and began a murder investigation. Law enforcement officers immediately noted the brutality of the crime. The victim had been tortured. Evidence suggested Sharron had tried to get up, meaning the killer had left her to die while she was still alive. The tortured schoolgirl simply did not have enough strength to save herself. Law enforcement officers also found other physical evidence at the crime scene. About 50 feet from the dead girl, tire tracks remained on the ground. A barely noticeable trail of blood droplets led from this point to the body. Since there were no signs of dragging, the detectives assumed that several people might have been involved. In her pocket, they found a receipt for the Leo jacket, which the unfortunate girl never had a chance to receive. The results of the forensic examination showed that Sharron's death had occurred just a few hours before the body was discovered. Obviously, she had been held captive from Saturday to Tuesday, subjected to abuse and rape. There were characteristic marks of strangulation on her neck. The girl had choked on her own blood. Forensic experts also recorded that her ribs were literally crushed. Her mother could not think about anything at that moment except for the murderer to be caught and punished as soon as possible. 3 blocks away from Sharron's brutal murder, Canada had already faced a similar crime against a minor. On July 9, 1974, 12-year-old Norma O'Brien was brutally killed. That evening, she had left home intending to play water polo at the pool. But upon arriving, the girl found that it was closed for repairs. Norma turned around and started walking home. She never made it there. That same evening, her body was found. The crimes bore chilling similarities, leading some to speculate they could have been committed by the same maniac. But the investigators had no leads. Then, after the massacre of Sharron on June 23, 1975, another girl went missing. 14-year-old Debbie Fisher was returning home on a red bicycle but never arrived. The next day, her naked body was found in the woods. Unlike the previous victims, Debbie had not been raped. The cause of death was a blow to the head with a rock. Soon, a 17-year-old boy was arrested for this crime, and he confessed to the murder, but Sharron's case remained unsolved. At the site where Sharron Prior's body was discovered, the police collected a lot of evidence that should have led them to the murderer. The detectives hoped to solve this case within a matter of days, but reality proved far from their expectations. 13 months had passed, and the investigators still did not have a prime suspect against whom they could bring an official charge. Law enforcement officers questioned 38 individuals, but the investigation reached a dead end. No fresh information was coming in, and all leads and clues turned out to be false. It seemed that the investigation had completely stalled. Everyone, except the murdered girl's mother, had given up. The woman could not come to terms with the loss and continued to search for at least some details that would shed light on the circumstances of her daughter's death. She understood that, on that evening, Sharron could hardly have walked far from the house. Around the same time, the girl had vanished without being seen by anyone. The investigators never managed to find a witness to the attack. It was as if it were the perfect crime. The grief-stricken mother was convinced that it was worth taking a closer look at all the residents of their street. One of them might have noticed a suspicious stranger or recognized him if the attacker himself lived nearby. The detectives were inclined to believe that the killer and rapist was a fairly young guy who most likely still lived with his parents in their neighborhood. The police considered every possibility. They theorized the killer might be a sadist who lured victims into his net. It all starts with control. Then comes humiliation and outright abuse. Eventually, even this is not enough for the pervert. He turns into a predator who goes out to hunt for new victims. Given this, the police deemed it necessary to carefully check all residents of the neighborhood who had a history of violence. The maniac could not restrain himself, easily flaring up with anger and instantly resorting to violence. The most terrifying realization was that they were probably dealing with a serial killer who needed to be stopped as soon as possible. At the moment, the murderer was one step ahead of his pursuers. Law enforcement officers were making every effort to track him down. But at that time, many modern technologies that could have aided the investigation were not yet available. The killer operated with impunity. Years later, on March 20th, 1981, another victim emerged. Tammy Leakey was visiting her grandmother. Like Sharron, the girl disappeared a few blocks from the house where she was staying. That same evening, a barely alive Tammy was discovered out in the open. A man called the police station and reported the terrible find. The poor girl was lying on the ground, naked, covered only with her own clothes. Medics desperately fought for the child's life, but the injuries were incompatible with life. The girl had been strangled. Although there were no signs of rape on her body, traces of male semen were found on her belongings. As in Sharron's case, the attacker acted remarkably sloppy. The perpetrators of this crime were never found. There were so many similar cases, the police were simply lost in speculation as to whether they were all connected. In 2000, Sharron's mother turned to the police once again. The woman insisted on reanalyzing all the materials in her daughter's case. In the quarter century that had passed since then, science and technology had made a huge leap forward. Forensic scientists reopened the evidence. They managed to isolate a DNA sample that did not belong to the victim herself. However, even after cross-referencing with the genetic profile database, no match could be found. The obtained biological material was carefully preserved for future comparison with samples from potential suspects. Later, this find became the key to solving the chilling case. In June 2004, the police received information about a garage where the killer might have held Sharron captive. The detectives immediately went to investigate. Around this time, a reward was offered, as much as $10,000, for any information that would help track down the brutal murderer who had taken the lives of two young girls. This event suggested that the investigation had made progress and the police had some new data at their disposal. For the convenience of concerned citizens who wanted to share their guesses and speculations with law enforcement, a special telephone hotline was opened. Although the investigation continued, no breakthrough was achieved at that time. Years later, a suspect emerged, a man named Franklin Romine. Patrick turned out to be a Canadian maniac whose guilt in the deaths of 5 women in Montreal was proven in court. Although he claimed to have had at least 9 victims, the rest of the bodies could not be found. The detectives had long suspected that Franklin might be involved in the murders of young girls and had tried in every way to find a connection between him and these chilling crimes. However, the experienced murderer persistently denied his guilt, claiming he had nothing to do with Sharron's death. Franklin had moved to another city with his parents. Friends and acquaintances characterized him as an extremely aggressive and cruel person, quite capable of killing a child. There were even several witnesses who allegedly heard him boasting about his involvement in Sharron's brutal murder. But here, too, fortune turned its back on the law enforcers. In November 1982, during a bloody showdown between rival gangs, Franklin was shot dead. He took all the secrets about his possible involvement in the attacks on the girls to the grave. Sharron's mother never stopped fighting. She viewed this grueling battle not only as a matter of honor for her family, but also as a moral obligation to all parents whose children were ruined by perverts and sadists. In 2019, the disconsolate woman took part in the filming of a TV show, along with 9 other families devastated by similar tragedies. They publicly accused law enforcement of incompetence and negligence. Police representatives refused to be present in the studio during the interview. The long-awaited breakthrough in this haunting case finally came. Just recently, the connection between the biological traces found at the crime scene and the DNA of the late Franklin Romine was officially confirmed. Romine's appearance fully matched the characteristics of the suspect provided by witnesses. The man lived in the area where the abduction took place. His car perfectly matched the tire tracks found near the unfortunate Sharron's body. Franklin had a dark criminal past. In particular, he had already been convicted of assault and rape. All these facts finally allowed the dots to be connected in this chilling, extraordinary story.